Well, welcome to another Cutting Edge show. I'm Omar Neal, one of your hosts. I'm the former mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, and the host of the You Got the Power syndicated radio talk show. We're elated to be here today on the Cutting Edge, where we discuss all things health and wellness, COVID-19, and beyond. Well, today we're going to have a very, very provocative but very important conversation. We're going to be talking about internalized racism, saving ourselves. And we have the guest to unpack this most important issue. We have Dr. Wendy Shire. She is executive director for the Center for Restorative Change at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. And we have one of our very own. She's been with us on many occasions on the Cutting Edge, Valerie Davis. She is a founder and project manager for Elevate Her, Inc. And we have Tamika Bailey, who is the director of the SWCOS Student Education at the Center for Restorative Change at the University of Maryland. It is so wonderful to have this conversation, but to have it with my friend, a brother from another mother. I'm talking about Dr. Stephen B. Thomas. We call him Dr. T amongst these parts. And of course, it is this brother who has, this is the vision of putting much of this together. So give it up for my friend and brother, Dr. Stephen B. Thomas. Hey, Dr. T, what's happening?
Hey, it's all good, Mayor. Anytime I'm with you, it's all good. And then you know what I'm realizing when that slide came up is what COVID has done to me. Stop shaving when COVID hit. I said, I'm not going to shave until Black people get the vaccine.
Oh, Lord.
And it's been growing ever since. I had no idea it'd come in like a Mennonite.
Well,
But
I mean, it looks good on you, man.
Thank
you're authentic, man. You do you, man. That's what's important, man. Do you, right?
And at a certain stage in life, you do you even more.
Right.
Because at a certain stage in life, you realize the way in which living in America, just living here in a society that is so race conscious, it gets under your skin, Mayor.
Yeah. Well, it was it was Marcus Garvey who said it first, but Bob Marley made it famous when he said, when others may free the body, none but thine own self can free the mind. And so we got to do this work ourselves, and regardless of what happens to us, that we have to save ourselves. And that's why I like this topic, internalized racism, saving ourselves, because that's the work we have to do. And so to have this conversation in this space on the Cutting Edge could not be a more appropriate place or time to have it, right?
And I'll say it about the timing. The pandemic was an eye-opener. The pandemic pulled back the curtain. And now we literally see how racism is institutionalized. We've had shows about that. But now we're going to talk about how it affects our internal vision of ourselves, our community, people who look like us. What a show.
Wow, what a show. Well, people see us out here in front, but they don't know this team behind the scenes, right? And that's headed up by Meg Jordan, our technical director. She is assisted by Maggie Daly, and of course, Sharia Khan, who is our social media coordinator, and Elijah Pugh Jr., a sound designer. These are the individuals who put us on the air, put us in the social media platforms and spaces, man, and do the newsletters and all of the publications. They connect with our guests and communicate with them, get them properly orientated, and all of that, all of the things that you don't see, they make happen. And so they are integral. That's why as we introduce ourselves, we also introduce them, giving them their props, as they say, giving them honor for what they do. And we appreciate all they do, both seen and unseen.
And they are battle tested. We started this during the pandemic. And man, this production is amazing.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get into this, man. We got some tremendous guests, but before we do that, I want to let people know how they can connect to us. We are on all of the major social media platforms. You can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, and others, right? Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and just kind of hang out with us, because we are always giving you information that you can use. And we also have a newsletter that we put out each and every week. It chronicles our show. So you will get a video recording of the previous Cutting Edge show, along with vignettes of our guests, as well as just information articles and just information that's pertinent to health and wellness, COVID-19 and beyond. And Maggie Daly is the person who puts that together. She is a yeoman in just a master at just compiling such a great newsletter each and every week. So kudos to Maggie Daly for the work that she does. Yeah,
absolutely, Mayor. You know, she's about to leave us to go off to medical school.
Why did you have to say that, man?
Because I'm saying that school will not be the same.
Hey,
she's going to change that school.
Well, you know, I'm just saying, I'm getting melancholy. You know when No, but she is, and we're so proud of her. She's about to go to medical school. She's going to be a doctor, a medical doctor, and so that's a cool thing. But she has made such an impact, an indelible impact on us in this show, and so we're going to truly miss Maggie. Excuse me. We're going to truly miss her, and we know that she's always going to be a part of us. So she's always welcome to come back and hang out with us and do a newsletter anytime she wants to. Just remote, they got
the internet out there.
That's what I'm saying. We'll figure out a way to hook her up and get her back into this thing, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Well, man, it's time, right? To have this conversation. Let's introduce our guests. We are just elated and blessed beyond measure to have such a great cast of guests to join us today. We have Dr. Wendy Shire. She is Executive Director for the Center for Restorative Change at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. I met her just maybe a week ago or something, not long ago. But when you meet her, you feel her presence. You know that you have met somebody very special. She's very authentic. Her work centers around those things that many people shun, those conversations that many people are uncomfortable with, not just people who are non-Black, but Black folk too have a difficult time, with these conversations, right? But she's true to herself, and in all things, I was always told, to thine own self be true. Where if it's any sister that's true to herself, it's Dr. Wendy Shire. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me and join me in welcoming our sister and our friend, Dr. Wendy Shire. How you doing, Doc?
We snap you on stage. That's how we bring you up. We snap. Welcome.
How you doing?
Here. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you for your work, for your life's work, for your obedience, because I know that this is not easy work. It's got to be frustrating at times, because even the people to whom you're trying to save, right, oftentimes reject truth, right? And you also can be injured by people who are offended by your work. right? There's that you can be hurt in a lot of ways, career-wise and otherwise, right? By telling your truth. And so we understand when you do something like this, it has to be a calling beyond your ambition, right? Right. And so thank you for that. We do appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is tough work. I will tell you that, but I am grateful to have, I'm honored to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
You know, Dr. Shire and I met recently putting together a proposal. And it's interesting how we can be in the same university system and not know one another. Right. And that's why this is so important. This is moment that we're in as we're coming out of the pandemic to reconnect in new ways. And so when I read your bio, Dr. Shire, positive schools, wow. Because a lot of the small text in there was about negative things that happen in schools, detention, suspensions, failures. But you have a program called Positive Schools. Where'd that come from?
Well, you know, we are really recognizing that our children, and this is Baltimore and many urban settings where there are Black and brown children, are struggling. And they're struggling because the schools are trying to operate in many ways as if many of our students do not have a history of experiencing systemic oppression. And when we send children who've experienced systemic oppression in their communities into schools, it's not business as usual, right? It's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It is now, you know, healing and support for the entire family. And so we started the center because we noticed that a lot of schools in Baltimore, started in Baltimore, we have a statewide mandate, but starting in Baltimore, you know, we're kicking children out into the school to prison pipeline. There's a direct pipeline between what happens in schools. By the time children get to third grade, a decision has been made about whether they're going to be able to read and whether there's a need for a prison cell for them. And so we realized that if we did not start working with schools from the time the children are very small, that we weren't going to be able to address the issues. And so our work is around changing the dynamics in schools from being a place that's punitive for children and families, where families have generational trauma in schools. You'll very often hear a parent say, well, they treated me badly in that school too, now they're treating my kid badly. And at the same time, teachers are overwhelmed and stressed and under-resourced. And we have this mixture of things going on that's not good for children. It's not good for communities. And so we wanted to try to turn that around. And we really focus on working on it with the adults in the building. This concept of internalized oppression shows up a lot in schools. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But we wanted to turn the concept of the negative school experience on its head and really think about, what do families and children need to thrive in schools? What do teachers and staff need to thrive in schools? And so we work a lot with restorative practices. It's not what you do, it's who you are and how you show up for children and for each other in schools. That's what we're really trying to change. The reading, writing, and arithmetic, in my mind, is second to issues like safety and, you know, and a sense of belonging and feeling like I can come into this place. And you have to feel safe to learn. You cannot learn if you feel as if you are in danger, or if you feel as if you don't belong here. And so we do a lot of work with school leaders to really help them create a positive school climate that makes kids want to come, makes kids want to stay, makes families feel that they're welcome in the school and that they can partner with the school staff around making sure their children have everything they need.
There's a saying that children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if we can create an environment that is authentic and welcoming and appreciative of their beingness, right? Then that's a space that they can learn, because technically this whole process is discovery of self. That's why you go to school, right? You know, so I mean, technically, I mean, duh.
As we open this conversation up in the context of books being banned, our history being taken out of the schools. Like, why now? And as we open this conversation up, sometimes we might in our own mental maps think, oh, Black kids in the city of Baltimore, but it's a Black city. Just like my county in Prince George is a predominantly African-American county. So don't the teachers now look like the kids? Isn't that what we would say? We want the teachers to look like the kids.
Yeah.
Aren't those teachers in Baltimore public schools Black teachers?
They are, for the most part, largely, and the administration is Black. Look, we are dealing with multiple generations of problems that we are trying to fix with very broad strokes, and that doesn't work. Just because somebody looks like the children does not mean they're good for them. Really quick story. I have boys. I have twin boys, and they are not difficult children, right? So, but I remember my son coming home and being just crestfallen, just really upset. And I was like, what is the matter? He said that the principal was yelling at me. Now, the principal's a Black man. So in his mind, this principal looks like him. In many ways, the trauma that comes from that relationship, because that man looks like he could be in my child's family, it's so much more meaningful when he yells at my kid, right? And so he was yelling at him, and my son came home and he was like, he talked to me as if I was a bad kid. And the whole dinner time, he was like, I'm not a bad kid, I'm not a bad kid. It was so hard for him to get past the fact that this Black man was treating him as if he were, a criminal, or as if he were problematic. I think sometimes we miss the opportunity to develop those relationships with our children, because in many ways they see their teachers that look like them as looking like their family members. So what they say matters, how they treat them matters, right? So we want to assume sometimes that the issues that Black children experience are coming all from white people. Well, it's coming from white supremacy. Let's be really clear, right? White supremacy and whiteness culture, whiteness practices are not dependent on skin color. So any of us who have been socialized in a country that was colonized or run or even really touched by Europeans have adopted whiteness practices, a sense of what we need to do to be professional. None of us would have gotten to where we are if we didn't adopt some kind of white supremacy, right? We wouldn't get to this professional level. In order to get there, you have to behave a certain way. Well, sometimes it is very hard for us to figure out where those whitenesses practice should stop, so that we are not continuing to hurt ourselves, because you turn whiteness, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, but whiteness practices actually hurt everybody. And, we talk about internalized racism. Internalized racism has two poles. There's internalized racial superiority. There's internalized racial inferiority, right? White people and Europeans, they're socialized into this concept of superiority. They don't have to think about their race. It's not something that is really a part of their day-to-day world. But for people of color, we receive messages every single day about our inferiority, right? And so we very often carry those through our work, through our lives, and we act them out on people that are around us. And so we see that happening a lot in schools.
Wow. This is what we're going to do, because I can't wait to get into this conversation. I just put a pin in some of the things I wanted to do. But we got some more guests, man. We got to bring them on. So we can have this guest. Our next guest is a person who needs no introduction for the cutting edge. She has been with us on many, many occasions. In fact, if you really want to think about it, she's backed by popular demand. This is Val Davis. We call her Val Davis, but she's very dear to us. She's the founder and project manager of Elevate Her Inc. And but her work is very much in the same space. She came from a preaching family, and she really, her family's from the South, and that's what I was always I'm always enamored by the fact that many people who find themselves in the North, their roots are in the South, right? And so right down here where I am. And so that same culture, that same your lived experience permeates their being, even though they may be in another geographical location. Well, she is a down home person because she is very true to herself. I have had opportunities to say something, and Valerie Davis would check the host on this show. So I say, all right, you got it. You got the power. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a dear friend of the Cutting Edge, backed by popular demand, Valerie Davis. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me back. I always say when I get into rooms and I talk truth, I will start the meeting by saying, listen, I'm guaranteed to say something that's going to make you question whether I ever should have been invited and make you not want to invite me back. And I'm okay with that.
But you know what? Let me tell you something. That's why you got back here.
Oh my goodness.
You got it, because that's what we want. We believe that we are all possessors of some truth. And as we bring our truths together, then and only then do we get closer to the truth, right? And so I invite you to share your truth as honestly as you can articulate it, right? That's what we want here. That's what we seek here. That's how we're going to get to this. We can't scratch where we don't itch and laugh that stuff ain't funny no more, because that doesn't work, right? We have to really get into dealing with the real true problems and issues that impact the African American community directly. And then we got to work on solutions and not just restating the problem and pontificating about stuff. But what are we going to do about it? That's why saving our own selves was the tag to internalized racism.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying? It's that point. And that's the work that you do, right? Is figuring out how do we elevate her, right? Right? You know, how do we lift the esteem collectively, right? Of a people. And that's the work we do. And in the place where there is so much internalized racism, it's difficult to elevate people who have been told that they're less than, right? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Mayor, just before you set Val up.
What is it?
You know, I just got to brag on you a little bit, because she's out in the streets, Mayor. She's on the front line. She's got the signs in front of the folk that need to hear the voices that are not heard. She walks the walk and talks the talk. She's a warrior. Yeah. And so I want to give you the floor now, Val, but one of the things in your bio that you talk about, it's in the name that the mayor just mentioned, elevate her, is the lives of women. Why is it so important that we emphasize women in this effort to free ourselves from this, I don't even know what to call it, Dr. Wendy. From
hot mess. You could just say hot mess that we're all in. That's good.
I don't need an academic word. Why is it so important to elevate her?
I got together with a group of 8 other Black women during the pandemic. This was April of 2020. And I was drying my tears and changing my nighttime pillowcase, which was soaked with tears, 2 weeks into the pandemic, because the nonprofit that I had been running, focused on women and girls for 5 years, was destroyed in 2 weeks. Wow. 2 weeks gone. Everything was in person. My board members, 2 of them were teachers, and they said, bye, we have to figure out Zoom. It was just like watching something crumble before your eyes. And so I'm also downstairs at the kitchen table with my then 9th grader, trying to figure out Zoom and what are we doing and why are we having playing soccer in the hallway on a cell phone so the gym teacher can see that we are doing gym. Just foolishness, right? So I'm like, Lord, Lord, Lord. Now, listen, you told me, because that's how we talk. I said, listen, you told me to start this nonprofit. You told me to focus on Black women and girls. I made it to 5 years. I never took a salary. This was my first year. We were going to have a 5-year gala, and then you let it all fall apart. Yeah. And so I'm crying and I'm carrying on, right? And then I started to pay attention to how many Black people were dying from COVID. And I said, this cannot be, this cannot happen. So I'm talking to friends, and we got 8 Black women on the phone. Long story short, that's how Elevate Her was born. I didn't know nothing about a COVID-19, 20 or 21. All I knew was this many Black people cannot continue to die. And what we saw, and there was only one scientist in the group, Black female epidemiologist, but we had project manager, finance, marketing, community health, blah, blah, blah. We said, contact tracing is a key. If you're not able to literally connect with spiritually, physically, psychologically with the person you're trying to convince to protect themselves and others, we are not going to stop this. And contact tracing was not being completed in Black households because you had lovely little people from the University of Chicago calling, Aunt Betty Ann and Uncle Leroy, talking about you cannot usher this Sunday because you have to stay home. And Uncle Leroy was like, no, this is who I am. So thank you for the call, or I'm going to drive this bus because I have to pay a bill. So we said, we'll get into contact tracing. Long story short, couldn't get contracts, but we ended up doing community health work because nonprofits had to save the world. And what we realized were 2 things, getting to the point about elevating her. Black women were the ones who were disproportionately affected by that scourge. Not only did we lose more businesses, not only did we have to make choices between making $1 or Zooming with kids, but we were carrying the weight of the household before in many ways. And now we had to carry the kids. We got to make these awful Sophie's choices about, can I continue my career or do I do this Zoom, right? And so that's where Elevate Her came from. And we knew that we could connect because women are, inherently connected. We said we can make these connections to Uncle Leroy and Aunt Betty Ann and whoever else. And so that was the impetus for this. But even post-COVID, the same facts are true. Who is it? Zora Neale Hurston said the Black women are the mules of America.
Yes. Ooh, I didn't know that quote. I better be.
Right?
Okay.
Well, I'm a bad mama jamma mule. Come on with it. Okay. Because now that we've proven the need for us to come save the world, but we went back, instead of reimagining the future, we went back to the old ways, and we are still now suffering, disappearing, getting sick, dying in childbirth. Somebody's got to stand on the wall. To connect the children and to the women and the men. And I believe that, unfortunately, this society we live in doesn't want to allow the brothers to do it. That's another conversation. It is not allowed for Black men to take that role. Not that we want to usurp them. That's not what we're doing internally. Not allowed. So here we go, sisters. This is it. Come on.
Well, Frederick Douglass says power succeeds nothing without a demand.
There you go.
Never has and never will, right? And so, but that's another. We'll get into that as well. Val Davis, it's so good to see you. I just love you. I love you. Let's bring up our last guest for today. I just met her today, but it feels like I've known her for a lifetime. Her name is Tamika Bailey. She is a social worker personified. She's the director of the SWCOS Student Education at the Center for Restorative Change at the University of Maryland. When she deals with this notion of mental health first aid, and figuring out ways to identify when people are having mental crises around you, and oftentimes we're having them, and unbeknownst to ourselves and others, what we're going through. So we are not reactive to what is happening, but we have the knowledge to know how to respond appropriately. And being a former police officer, I realize how that emotional unintelligence that takes place has caused for a lot of people who are having mental health crisis to be killed, because people can't identify what to do and how to do it. Well, this is the work that she does, not only in other spaces, but to teach people how to identify those situations where people find themselves in those mental health crises and how to help them out of it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a new family member to the Cutting Edge, Tamika Bailey.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Let's snap
how
her
you
up
doing?
now. Let's snap her up, Wendy. Come on.
Good. You know, it's so good to it's so good to have you on, and to be a part of the family. And you know that, you know, once you get on the Cutting Edge, you're always a part of the family. I just want you to know that that you have been fully brought into the family with all the, as they say at the universities, Dr. T, with all the rights and privileges appertaining thereto.
There you go.
Yeah,
You know,
well, it's
you know, Mayor, when I saw her bio and welcome, Tamika.
Thank you.
You know, the fact that you have moved into the arena of writing children's books, locks like mine, but I'm going to ask you about the one called Secret. When you come up with a title that you think will get the attention of your audience, there's a story there. What's the story of Secret?
So it's actually called The Telling Secret. And it was a children's book that I wrote to talk about sexual abuse in the Black family, because it is taboo, it's something we do not discuss. And it was created, so it tells the story of two best friends, one who discloses to her friend that she has experienced some inappropriate touching from a family member and struggling with how to deal with that. So it is a tool for children to be able to understand how to experience that process and that they're not alone, but also a resource for parents as well, because it gives some teaching tools or some tips and things about how to approach and engage in that conversation, that very important conversation with our young people about their bodies and about boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay. So that's where that came from.
And you think there's a link there with internalized racism at some point, yeah?
Well, so my expertise that I want to talk about tonight as it relates to the internalized racism is specifically dealing with the mental health piece. And I bring that up because unfortunately, I feel like we live in a world where, you know, people with mental health concerns have to suffer in silence because of the stigma, right? We respond very differently to mental health issues than we do with medical issues. And this is even more of a challenge for younger folks because they aren't always able to articulate what they're experiencing. And so depression and anxiety in children and adolescents may present as maladaptive behavior. And instead of getting help, they get diagnosed. And in particular, we see this phenomenon with our Black children, especially our boys, being misdiagnosed at much, much higher rates for ADHD, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, when the real underlying issue is the trauma triggers in their environment. And the treatment is not the same, right? So our primary survival responses are that fight, flight, freeze. And just consider what that looks like in a young person. So we have to think about, you know, what happened to them versus focusing on the behavior that we're seeing, what's wrong with them, or why are you behaving this way? And you would be surprised at how many folks who look like us that don't understand that, despite knowing the trauma because they've experienced it themselves. But we get into the classroom and we what's the word I'm looking for? We adultify our children. We expect them to be able to manage and maintain in a certain way, not recognizing that they are just as impacted by the systemic oppression that they're experiencing, and probably even more so because of the systems that are in the educational institution, right? And so, you know, Mark running down the hall, he's doing that because his stress response system has been activated and he doesn't have the skills to respond in an appropriate way. And instead of recognizing that behavior as anxiety, we suspend or we penalize Mark for his reactions. As Dr. Shire was talking about earlier, how punitive sometimes our school systems can be. And so we know what that leads to. We know that it perpetuates other issues for our children, such as the disproportionate disciplinary actions that reinforce that school to prison pipeline, overrepresentation in special education. And so that's why this is really important. My passion is really for the young folks, the younger generation, that K through 12. That is actually my focus at the Morgan State University. I am a PhD student, soon to be.
Come on now, snap.
Make sure you tell Dr. Wilson that you met me. The president of the Morgan State University is a Tuskegee man. He was in school with me at Tuskegee University. So I just want you to know that.
Okay. I bring that up because my research interest is really in culturally responsive trauma-informed care.
Wow.
For years, schools have been, our trauma assessment tools that are used in schools are informed by the original ACEs study, the Average Childhood ACEs study. But that study that was done primarily on white individuals who had, they had income, they had access to healthcare, so it looked very different. What they did not look at or consider, so with that particular study, the original Average Childhood Experiences study, it looked at things like abuse, neglect, household dysfunctions, which do impact our children too, but it did not consider those expanded adversities that they deal with, like racism, discrimination, oppression.
Wow.
And when that child comes into the school and they're seeing images of themselves on the media, people like them who are being publicly lynched, let's just say, you know, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is processing that with them, but we expect them to continue with business as usual. That's not okay. That impacts their mental health. And so what we're thinking of as being defiance is just a child who is struggling with anxiety. And we think that depression in children is supposed to look the same way it looks with adults, but it doesn't. That depression doesn't look like sadness. It may look like agitation, irritability, frustration. But if we're not understanding or looking at our children from that lens, then we pathologize some of the behaviors. And we do it too. We pathologize, we contribute to that system as well. So
Wow.
That's deep. You know, well, I'm gonna confer upon you your doctorate today. With all the rights and privileges appertaining. Let me get back to because I want to circle back around to this because you know, Dr. Shire, you said something about your son and a black male, the principal, you know, yelling at him or whatever. And he internalized it as being somehow he thought that he was a bad person, right? So how is it that when we are whatever chastised for whatever reason, we look at it in terms of ourselves rather than the behavior? It appears that he looked at the behavior. He did not separate what he thought was the behavior, but he thought about him as his beingness. And why is that?
Well, you know, so from the point of view of my son, you know, kids have, you know, as Tamika's laying out, kids don't necessarily have the ability to pull all of these concepts apart, right? If you tell a kid that something is bad, you got to be really careful how you use that word, right? Because you may be talking about this behavior being bad, and that child's going to hear, you think I'm bad. So you got to be very careful. Children have a lot of trouble really separating that. But the other part of it is that our society has created this container, this sort of, I think about it as kind of like a basin or a bowl that says that Black people are intrinsically inferior, right? And so we all kind of have absorbed that. If you can't watch television without getting that message. You can't read the newspaper without getting that message. In fact, you know, you can't drive through a Black urban neighborhood very often without getting that message, because if you see the abandoned buildings and the pothole streets and all that, it tells you something about your value and your worth. Right. So all of us are walking around with this sort of container of messages that we've gotten from the world. It doesn't take much to put more in, right? Because the container is already there and it's open and it's waiting, because our world has really socialized us into these messages. And even those of us who are aware of it, and we're trying so hard to make sure that we socialize our young people to be strong and confident, it is very hard to combat those messages. And so it's easy to reinforce, right? It's very easy to reinforce. in a way that a kid that did not get those messages about themselves perhaps would have heard that, would have experienced that very differently, right? They may not, they don't have the same container just waiting to take all the messages. They're kind of like, well, what is that about? It has nothing to do with me. I'm fine. I'm good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on the messages you've been getting from this world. And we as parents and loving adults surround our children. We are trying to pour all this good stuff into the container. You're wonderful. We'll do rites of passage. We'll do all this stuff. But sometimes those other messages are so strong. Mm-hmm. They're so strong.
It's interesting, Ms. Davis, the point of the matter is it's this hierarchy of humanity that we're really talking about, that people who are Caucasian are at the top and people who are what we call colored at one time, Black and African American, are at the bottom. I've said this before, but when I grew up in Alabama, there was this saying that white you right, yellow you mellow, brown stick around, black get back, right? And when you are, and as Dr. Shire talks about it, it's something that's internalized. You don't have to think about it. The microaggressions that we experience daily, walking into a store, perfectly with the perfect intent to buy something, but being surveilled, right? Watched, right? Even me, a person is very capable of buying whatever it is I walked in the store for, no intention, right? But they watching me like I'm gonna take something in a dollar store. What I mean? But I feel it, right? And so we are dealing with these things at all levels, right? How do you process that and it does not impact you in an adverse way?
I don't think we have to reach the point of processing or even trying to sift through messaging. When you think about when you go to when you eventually end up at a hospital or someplace after you have a baby, right? You fill out this card. And before you can decide who you are, somebody has to decide which box that you have to fit in. That you haven't done a thing but burp and poop and drink milk. You've done nothing. And before any messaging, before anything, we are forced to decide which of these things we're going to check and how does it fit in. And so to your point about humanity, our colonized, misogynized, whatever eyes you want to use it, way of world in which we live is an outside-in world with the focus on what's on the outside before I get to do or be or go, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't even need anybody else to say anything to me or about me to know that how I literally show up, how the baby shows up, how the woman who's pregnant, who's Black, shows up and doesn't get the medication. It's an outside-in world that doesn't even let me be, right? Doesn't let anyone be. And so when we talk about internalized, we're not even there. It's that it's externalized. I'm not even sifting through what should come into my heart, come into my mind, come into my psyche. It's given to me. And so when you talk about saving ourselves, I tell my daughter this, she's 16, 11th grade. I say, question everything. I'm gonna tell you two things in this life. You better get some Jesus, right? And question everything. Because, and I'm in this space working with Montgomery County, right? 14th largest school district in the country, biggest in the state of Maryland, most diverse, $3.2 billion budget, the size of a small country, led by a Black female superintendent now, and the next level is largely Black. We don't have a representation issue. Blacks on the board of education, blah, blah, blah. And today I had a meeting with the person who is doing data collection. And I said, what do you think about the idea of letting people self-identify when it comes to race, ethnicity, country of origin? You would have thought, I said, can we go to Mars? And she was very open to it, but she said, her immediate reaction was, the federal government needs us to use these categories. Department of Education needs it. The State Board of Education needs us to use these categories. And I said, that's fantastic. What I'm saying is use the categories, explain to people, this is for government use. And below that, give them, if it takes 47 fill in the blanks, the opportunity to say who they are. And then you do the alignment, right? You do the cross-reference. And it was like a light bulb came on. I said, because listen, being in the community health space, public health officials have known and leaders have known forever that the only actionable data is below those categories. We saw it in COVID, right? When they say, go into this neighborhood and you got to have language, you got to understand the culture, and you got to, if you want to give a food box, you don't get this in the food box to that one. When we need people who know that. That's a level of knowledge and action that is not possible with those little categories. But the mind of the person had not conceived, because that's her job, is to collect data for the feds and the state, that we could do something different that would allow a person to be who they are. And so when I go into the school and I say, I don't want to check that box. Like, I want to say that we have 3, Native American tribes in our family, and we are African American and descendants of chattel slavery. Where's that in the box? Where do I write that? Can I do that in the other line? Why? Because when you go to say whether or not Black children are succeeding and you lump us all in there, you don't really know who actually is. And what we have seen, and anecdotally and subjectively, is that the descendants of chattel slavery are on the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom.
Right. It's interesting.
That's the truth, Ruth.
Yeah, that's the truth, Ruth.
You
go ahead, Dr.
Mayor. Val is a warrior. And
not this morning. I felt like I told somebody in a meeting, I said, I want to lay down in the street and let a truck run over me today.
Okay.
Because y'all getting on my nerves just that much. And
Lord.
Talking about mental health, I went in the back in the garden. I canceled my morning meetings. I started planting tomatoes. I was like, come on, Lord, fix me up by the afternoon. So I'm a warrior, but I got to take breaks.
Yeah. All right.
Well, part of it is that pulse beat that we need. And one of the things we do is try to get a pulse beat from the audience that's out there. And we have our wellness warriors out there who are on that front line listening to you. And they're listening for the actions that they can take. They're having people sit in their chair with all of these issues you're describing, even the little kids who come in for their first haircut. They're absorbing everything that person is now sharing with them. How might they be a help in helping us save ourselves? I want you to give thought to how the barbers and stylists can be a partner in all that we're talking about here, including with our white brothers and sisters. Many who want to do the right thing, but as the pandemic has exposed, a whole lot of good people, I was in a room full of them recently, have just gone back to business as usual.
Yeah.
And you'll be in meetings where you have to raise the question, are there any lessons from the pandemic that we're bringing forward today? And it's like silence. I don't think we can let that happen. This is our moment for fundamental change.
Let me say this, Dr. T. I think oftentimes what we do is we associate interpersonal relationships with racism more than we do institutionalized racism, right? And I think that's where we miss a lot of it. So that's why a lot of people, particularly people who are classified as white or Caucasian, when they get a kind of visceral feeling when this conversation comes up, because they feel you're attacking them. And it's not about an individual. It's about a system that puts you, that categorizes you, that places you in a box, that I call her my attorney, but she said that don't use that. Then that's a personal joke we have. but
box.
but that's another box we do. But so I want to talk about a little bit, Miss Bailey. Help me out with this notion of institutionalized racism, and how do we articulate that? How do we use language to help people to understand it's not about you, boo, right? I'm talking about something that's beyond just an individual.
Right. And so again, I go back to the importance of being intentional about creating a culturally responsive, trauma-informed program for children. It can't just be looking at, I think I heard it said before, I think Mayor, you said it best, I heard a delusion of inclusion. And that is exactly what the schools that are not paying attention or not taking into consideration these other factors that impact our Black children, that it goes beyond those conventional adversities. And when you're not looking at that and you're not being intentional about that, and we're still using trauma assessment tools that don't take into consideration those other variables, then we are then complicit in continuing to perpetuate the outcomes that our Black children experience. And so that has to change. We have to understand specifically what our children need in order for them to be successful and to counter some of those negative outcomes. One of the questions that you asked about what can we do, I feel really strongly about the mental health first aid training. I think it's a very good training. I have some concerns and I'll talk about that too, but I really appreciate that it teaches individuals how to recognize the signs, the symptoms, and some of the risk factors of mental health, how to be able to listen non-judgmentally, and also to be aware of resources that you can refer individuals to in the community. The training also dispels some of the myths that we have related to mental health. One myth in particular is that, asking a person about suicide or how they're feeling, that will actually encourage them to make an attempt, when in actuality, when you ask a person if they're thinking about suicide, it can help relieve some of the anxiety. It can serve as a deterrent, right? Because it counters the isolation, the loneliness that person may be experiencing. And one thing that I like to say about first aid mental health training is that it doesn't teach individuals how to be surgeons or physicians anymore than, it doesn't teach them how to be professional mental health experts any more than the regular first aid CPR training for our physical bodies teaches you to be a surgeon or a physician. But it does help you to be able to have some basic intervention skills, because people, as I mentioned earlier, are suffering in silence. And when you don't know how to engage them, it can actually make the situation much worse. So
I'm gonna give you all the props, because I participated in the training for youth in particular. And what I found that it did was, for everyone, it gives you the language of mental health. And somebody said, why do we actually think we should know anything about this? Like, what? It's like money. Who knows how to manage money coming out of high school? Did they teach it? Was there a course? No, my home ec was make a pillow and learn how to make pizza homemade. There was no economics in there. So when it comes to what we can do, in addition to the hair magazines, put some magazines in there that will educate people about the things that we need to know about health, about money, right? Sit under the dryer and let's get real smart.
We can do that.
For the children and for the adults, but also begin to use the language of it, right? Yeah. And even in your area where you're into helping people to become who they want to be by being in your salon or being in your chair, focus on the being and not on the doing. Wow. Right? Because not what are you doing and did you get promoted and I got blah, blah. That's interesting. But how are you doing? Right? Yeah. You all are extraordinary listeners. You are trusted people. And when you marry that with what Ms. Bailey's talking about, knowledge of how to listen and look for and whatever, have those resources. Put the poster up, dial 988. Like whatever it is, use your wall space, your magazines, your bold conversations, and then invest in the people that work with you. Right? Do you really know how the bowl girl is doing? Do you really, really know? Like, model what you want to see in others by making your salon or your shop like the healthiest place going. Have you had your mammogram? Did you go get your colonoscopy? I'm holding you accountable, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Val, I think coming out of the pandemic, any Black business and especially barbershops and beauty salons that are in business now, they have a loyal following.
Absolutely.
They have a base. And you know what I've seen? They don't want to come back to business as usual. They want to distinguish themselves as shops that promote health and prevent disease. And that's why they're here on the cutting edge.
Yeah. You know, we got, do you know, we are almost at 30 minutes before this is over with. God, how does time fly like this? But I got to ask Dr. Shire something. Dr. Shire, I hear oftentimes of the number of African-American males that are killing each other in communities around the country. I just got a report that in Pensacola, Florida, 280 young boys under the age of 25 were killed, I guess, in the last 5 to 6 years in one city. I want to know, what do you attribute this to? I know hurt people, but when you have this kind of carnage, this kind of self-destruction in the African American community, it has to have some reason. What do you think it is?
So, you know, I want to start by saying that white people kill each other more than Black people
Right.
kill each other. So I always have to say that, because, you know, people are, you know, sort of this concept of Black on Black crime. But it is a problem, right? It is a problem that we're having. One of the things that happens in a lot of communities is, if the world doesn't respect you, and the world doesn't show you, society doesn't show you as being an elevated human being, respect is a core requirement for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't feel powerful in your world, powerful in your society, and your society is constantly telling you that you are less than, respect becomes an even bigger thing. And what we see in a lot of communities is there's a lot of beef about respect. And really what people are saying is, I want to be seen as fully human. And if I can't be seen as fully human, then I'm gonna, you know, go after you. I'm gonna go after you. Just think about this, because in a lot of communities, our young men don't have a lot of opportunities. Oh, let's just look at Baltimore City, for example. Right now, 6% of Baltimore City children are reading on grade level and doing math on grade level. What does that mean for their future? So if you don't have opportunities, you don't see yourself as powerful, you don't have a path forward, and you've got other people around you who are sort of in the same place, then you're vying for respect, for power, any way you can get it. What happens is that, you know, I often say to teachers in schools when they are dealing with young Black men, respect is critical. If you disrespect a young Black man, he is going to react to that, because this is one place where he should be able to feel respected. He goes out out in the community and he has a beef with somebody around disrespect, or you're in my turf, or you said this to me, you looked at me, you stepped on my shoes. All of that is about power. That is about feeling whether or not somebody feels powerful. When people feel powerful, they don't care if you stepped on their shoes. They don't care if you're in their space. They don't care if you looked at them sideways, because they know who they are. They have power. All of this is wrapped up in this internalized racial oppression, right? It's all wrapped up in the idea that we have systematically in this society stripped Black men of dignity and respect. And then we're surprised when they erupt, right? If people can't, you know, even my mentor, his name is Ron Chisholm, he's the co-founder of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. He talks all the time about the young men with their pants hanging down below. They're just trying to be seen. He calls it exaggerated visibility. I have to be, you ever been driving down the street and somebody's sauntering across the street and they make you stop and wait for them to cross? Slowly, slowly. You're gonna wait for them because they may not have any power they may not feel they have power in any other way. And so what we have to figure out to deal with this is that these young men have to feel powerful in their lives. They have to see something that says that their dignity and their respect is upheld. I know we want to think it's all about the guns, and guns are a problem. They absolutely are a problem. But I will tell you that racism is a bigger problem. If we deal with the structural racism that is happening in Black communities, and these Black young men have mentors, people around them that are doing things and are involved with them, we wouldn't see all this killing.
Yeah.
See, let me ask. Can I ask her a question?
Hold up now. Hold up. Go ahead, Mayor.
No. If
one of y'all said no.
If Val Davis want to ask the question, man, you think you know the way Val Davis got to me last time? I'm gonna let Val Davis make the question. Then we're gonna do some things. Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead. Once, just quickly.
We all know, especially you, Miss Bailey, and you, Dr. Shire, that schools were not created for us.
They were not. And
the way they are now is the way they were created. It hasn't changed much. If you look at a picture of a school and a prison, same. The buses for the prison, the school, the same. The lunches for the prison, the school, the same. And you made the connection between, forecasting the beds or prison cells. Why do we keep sending our children there? You talk about saving ourselves. Why are we doing it? It makes no sense. The data don't. We're not getting the results. It's making us sick. They're not increasing the number of people that look like us in the front of it. Why are we doing it?
You are preaching to the choir because it's so interesting because I wrote a novel because I needed to sort of envision a future of where we could go as Black people. And the novel I wrote, set in Baltimore in 2024, all the Black children were going to freedom schools.
Freedom schools.
Right there.
Wow. Right. Okay.
And we withdrew our children from the traditional school system, and we took our children to. So here's the thing. I grew up in Jamaica, and my Jamaica, West Indies, and then I went to Jamaica, New York. So just to clarify. And what we were taught about our history, about our heroes and sheroes are what have brought me to this place in my life. We learned about the struggles for our freedom. We learned about how we fought the enslavers. We learned about, all our amazing inventions. We learned about the societies. We learned that our lives did not begin on the plantation. We learned all of these things. And then I came here, and the history I learned, I came here at 14, and the history I learned, I was like, that doesn't sound right. Where's the rest of it? All this stuff is missing. I was actually going to say, when you talked about what the barbers should talk about in the chairs, is that we should be talking about our history. We as a people, and Marcus Garvey said this, we cannot chart a way forward if we can't look behind and know where we're coming from. Because what happens if we can't see the way forward? And as Valerie said, the schools weren't created for us. But if we don't understand how school systems were created and how Black people, ended up in school systems and everything that happens, what will happen is that if we don't know our history, we look at the future and any symbolic progress we see, we're like, oh wow, we have arrived, we have come, but we don't see the history, and so part of what I think we need to be talking about is our background as Black people, wherever we are from in the diaspora, right? Who are we? We need to be talking about the fact that there was a big pandemic in 1918 and 1919 called the Spanish flu that was followed by the Red Summer of 1919, the Tulsa massacres. These two things go hand in hand, an intense pandemic and racial unrest. Have we not seen some of that? Did we not see everything erupt in 2020? Are we not looking back and understanding what that what is happening now in our society is not new. We have to be talking about our history. And a lot of people don't even know that freedom schools are an option. How do we get back to knowing that in the 70s, the Black Panthers were feeding people in communities and we're talking about history and we were our children were learning. I mean, like but we are not talking about that.
Because we keep, well, we're only
Mayor,
not talking about
Well,
it.
I saw, I knew we.
Oh,
Mayor.
Worms. Let me say this. I guess that's why people like the governor of Florida don't want you to learn history, because
that's exactly right.
You got it. So now you have explained why. Yeah, okay. Now that makes sense to me, right? Right. You know, but a person told me this at one time, and then I'm gonna go. Dr. Cooper, I'm gonna tee you up, okay? They say if you don't know your history, your future will always be a mystery.
That's good. That's a t-shirt.
Is that right? Real talk. Dr.
good.
Cooper, bring her up. Dr. Cooper, I'm having fun with these wonderful people. And you know, and we talked about it because, you know, Dr. Shire is one of the family members now, but this is her first time on the show, right? But you see her spirit, same spirit.
Absolutely.
You know, Miss Bailey, well, Dr. Bailey, really, you know, I'm giving you already
Manifesting it
already, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
but you know, and Miss Davis, you know, you always with us, right? But you see the spirit of this place where we can be honest with each other, right? That's what we need. And that's what validates us. That's the power we have, is when you're in a space. And we talked about, you know, feeling powerful or feeling powerless, right? Right. When you're in a space like the cutting edge, that's where your power is, because you're around people who can accept you for your authentic selves. Your thoughts, Dr. Cooper?
Well, first and foremost, this is, like you mentioned, a spirited conversation. And I do apologize for being late, but what I have heard and what I did hear, absolutely informative and absolutely pertinent and relevant to what we need to do as not only communities of color, but also as individuals. We don't want to lose our history. It is our history that brought us here.
Right.
We have to also take steps to debunk any myths and stereotypes, because we are a powerful people that come from, you know, a long heritage of kings and queens. So we have a responsibility not only to accept and become complacent and accept status quo, but to be change makers. Okay. And part of this is understanding where we come from in order to grow and affect change.
You know, Dr. Cooper, I just want to say you're never late. I want this audience to know she's at a meeting, meeting, and come out the meeting because she want to come on the show.
Right on time.
You see, you got her little visitor thing there, but she's out there with some elected officials and other people in power who can make decisions over our lives. And I'm so glad that you're there representing. But just tell this our guests who you are real quick.
My name is Sharon Gibbs Cooper. My mentor is Dr. Stephen B. Thomas. I have had the privilege and the opportunity to work with the Center for Health Equities, with the what we call warriors, health warriors and advocates, in helping to actually close those gaps in healthcare that were actually silenced and brought to life through our, I would like to call them soldiers in the field, Katrina, Michael, Andre, Fred, and all of them, and bringing that kind of information that helps our policymakers to better understand through the lens of our communities on those needs that are so often unmet. And so through that dialogue and cultivating relationships with the people in the community and building those trusted spaces, those have made those individuals across the nation a part of this initiative have had an impact that is immeasurable.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. Let's just hang out with us for a second. Go down to Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
And Mayor, while we're bringing up Dorothy, let's get the cloud in real quick.
Yeah,
we're going to run out of time. Just real quick, we'll ask you to think about a word right now that reflects how you're feeling at this moment. And yes, there's still a pandemic. It's not an emergency, according to the government. It's still a pandemic. So Tamika, what is that word? Type it into the chat, and then type as many words that you can come up with into that chat, and our team behind the scenes is going to build a cloud. The more people who say a word, the larger that word will be. And those of you out in social media land, just use your Q&A box. And for the next 60 seconds, put as many words in as possible as we continue this conversation. Okay, Mayor.
We always got to go down to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Hey, Dorothy, how are you doing, my friend? Let's snap her up as she comes up.
Come on, now snap her up.
Doing some wonderful things down there in Pine Bluff. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm Dorothy Reynolds with Impressive Styles Beauty and Barbershop and Elite Cuts Barbershop. And I am really enjoying this conversation. I wish you all could have been the whole panel with me today to be a cheerleaders behind me. I spent part of the day today discussing job placement for children for the summer. And I'm just, these kids are dear to my heart because I see them coming in and out of the barbershop and the beauty salon. And so the conversation was, well, these kids, those kids that are not in school all the time and that have missed so many days, and someone had the nerve to call them bad, that they should not be in office jobs. They should be in the jobs where they are cutting the grass and pulling leaves and the debris that fell off of trees. And I'm trying to tell them that one of these kids that you all are talking about know how to set up a telephone and may not have been able to read everything, but they have skills. And those skills need to be developed. Some of them can play piano without taking not one lesson.
Right.
They have many skills. What they should have done was conducted an evaluation when they interviewed them to see what skills they really had and not place all the quote unquote good kids, the A and B kids, in the offices and the other kids cleaning buildings. Nothing's wrong with it. Somebody have to clean the buildings, but don't quote unquote call them the bad kids.
Wow.
And treat them like that. So you wonder if the glass is half empty or if the glass is half full. And I left there very angry. And I told them if they want me to serve if they want the truth, they don't want me to serve on the committee.
Oh, Dorothy, come on now, snapper.
I think Miss Reynolds been around us too long.
That's right. She knew she had warriors behind her.
What we have rubbed off on her, man.
I'm so glad you could say I got angry, and I'm going to do something about it. Thank you so much.
This whole notion of assigning value to humanity, different people, based on some criteria that you established, that's really dangerous.
Yes.
Right. The interesting thing is, and we talked about it, it's like people don't understand education ain't what you put in, it's what you bring out. Yeah. To indoctrinate is to put in, to educate is to bring out. And a lot of people don't understand those concepts, and that's just really doesn't make sense to me. And they don't understand, Val Davis, that children have different modalities of learning.
Mm-hmm.
They learn different ways, right? And if you don't know how, if there is a saying that if I can't learn the way you teach, then teach me the way I learn.
I like that.
Another t-shirt. I like that.
Okay, I'm in another place altogether, as usual.
Okay.
I'm wondering why we continue to be surprised by any of this, and as opposed to expecting it. When you talked about assigning value, that's how we got here. That's what the auction block was about. Wow. That's what enslavement was about. That was any oppression, colonial, that is the model.
Right.
We want it to be something else, right? We want to believe something else when we go into these spaces because we need to suspend disbelief so we don't run out and kill folk every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I have this white friend who's my good white friend, Ashley, my one good white friend, Ashley. And I said, you know what? Every day you wake up and I haven't killed you in your sleep is a good day.
Wow.
No, I said, y'all recorded. Anyway, I tell her this.
Streaming all over the world.
The reason that I can tell her this is because this is a woman who knows more about Black history than I do.
Okay.
Right. She's beyond an ally. She's an accomplice.
There you go.
Right. And we straight talk from no chaser. Right. But what I'm saying is, why do we spend time, and no disrespect, Ms. Reynolds, I'm not criticizing what you said, because somebody's got to stand on the wall in the situations that we are presented with, right? But why do we continue to be surprised? Why do we continue to go, oh my God, right? That's how it's structured. That's the whole point. So
I don't even know if people are surprised, but every time you're confronted with it, it's like a new shock.
Okay, so here's the thing.
You just because you shocked me one time, I don't get used to the shock.
No question. But what we have to do, and this might not be good psychology, and I'm not a psychologist, but I am the child of civil rights activists out of Mississippi.
Wow.
We have to learn to process and move through our trauma and our emotions and our feelings and get the job done. Both together.
Well, I guess the question is what is the job? I mean, what are you talking about? Get the job? Okay.
Ourselves. So that's what you put in the title. To save oneself is to not be dependent on other people. We keep going to their schools, asking for permission, not triple. All the salon owners should have like 5 locations by the end of 2023. So that Ms. Reynolds doesn't have to go to somebody else and say, please employ these lovely Black children. We should be blowing up, recycling our money in our communities and leave them folks alone.
So Val,
right?
Val.
That part.
I'm saying we gotta have a part 2 here.
Dr. Shire,
we gotta have a part 2 here.
We gotta let Dr. Shire say something.
I'm with you, Val. Look, I am one of those people who thinks that, and oh gosh, y'all, I'm gonna get in trouble saying this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I think that desegregation was one of the worst things that ever happened to Black people. And I think that we got to figure out how to do for ourselves and build for ourselves, have our own economies. I know that this is not a popular way of thinking, but for goodness sakes, when are we going to recognize that in this capitalist system, we continue to be the capital? And we will continue to be the capital as long as this capitalist system exists. Because we built this country with our backs and our blood and our strength. What makes us think that at some point, after you've been in the kitchen, cooking the food and putting it on the table, that you get a seat at the table? What makes us think that's going to happen? Why do we keep thinking that's going to happen? Now, I will say, Val, I think it's both and, because we both grieve and we are trying to move forward. And I think that both are important, because when we fail to grieve, we have mental health problems, right?
So I'm all for the grieving, but like the Bible says,
you're right.
At some point, David
for the
got
grieving,
and he said, "The baby is dead. Let me dry my eyes and keep it moving."
So for both of you, what was my surprise, and I wanted to show surprise, is that Miss Dorothy, because early in the pandemic, she was never involved in any of this kind of stuff. She come on a cutting edge and got certified, turned her shop into a vaccine clinic, and then walked across the street, engaged those young Black men that would have made her turn around if she had listened to everything. And now she got a whole little crew of young Black men who listen to her.
Yeah.
Think of her as grandma. That's the person in the community that can help set somebody straight the right way.
Hey, Dr. T, the word cloud, please.
Let's bring the cloud up. Let's see what the call speed is. And you got Atlanta and Philadelphia out there.
You all don't know. We got 15 minutes. No, not 15 minutes. We got 11 minutes left. What's that? 11? No, we got 20. What do we, I mean, got 11
It's 8:19. Look at this. Look at this.
Thankful,
Even with
hopeful,
this heavy
curious,
conversation.
resolute, determined. You see what I'm saying? Those are the large words. That's what most people said. And so when you have authentic conversations, that's where the power comes. When you're in spaces where you can, when you don't feel like you have to subdue your passion in order to be in that space and not be attacked. Nobody's going to attack you on the cutting edge for telling your truth. We expect it. We elicit it. That's why we have this space, right?
And Mayor,
Right.
you talk about history. I'm hearing echoes of the debates that we had in the past with Marcus Garvey and with W.E. Du Bois and with Booker T.
Right.
We are echoing the
Right.
same strategies, and they've left a passage for us.
Right.
They've left a way forward for us.
Right. It's powerful, man. Community focus, concern, humanity, blessed. Think about it. Fresh mentoring, right? Empowered, children activated. Man, this is great. Troubled too, like you have to find troubled is right over there too. Helpful and momentum.
Stay on that trouble just for a bit, because we talk about taking action and we can't boil the ocean. But our young people are also dropping dead on the streets because of opiate and other problems. And here again, it's where these poles back here can be a safe haven, a harbor for safety. And our public health minute, Mayor.
Yeah.
We have a public health
we've
minute
been talking
on
about this how people are dying of opioids and fentanyl and all of that.
So let's kick that
Public
off.
Health Minute with Meg Jordan. Meg, tell us about what's happening in that space.
Hi, everybody. So I want to talk to you today. We talked last time about how to use Narcan, right? And some of you got Narcan in the mail. And if you're coming to our event this weekend, which we're going to talk about as well, they're going to teach you how to give Narcan on site. But when you learn this, and when you look at what I've taught you, there's something in there that I didn't put in here. So I'm going to add to it tonight. Next, please, Maggie. So when a person does whatever, heroin, some kind of, any kind of opioid, they're not getting just that opioid, right? We know it's been cut with something. And so we're going to talk about two things that it probably is cut with. And the first is fentanyl. So fentanyl is an opioid too. It's a pain medication. And actually, I learned this just today. There are legitimate uses of fentanyl. It's used in hospitals. If you go into the hospital and you've broken your leg, you might get a fentanyl patch that releases fentanyl for 72 hours. This can be prescribed to people. So fentanyl is a drug that can be used in humans, and it can be used safely, but it's in the drug supply. Why? Because it gives it a kick. Because fentanyl is a really, really strong opioid, which is why if it's in the drug supply, people are in more danger because they can overdose with less, right? So if a person has a drug that's been contaminated with the fentanyl, the naloxone is going to help. It'll actually do the same thing. It'll reverse the opioid overdose in that same way that it does for other opioids. But they might need 2 doses because the fentanyl is so strong, right? So after you give that first dose, and if they don't respond to it, you can give them another dose. You might need to do that with the fentanyl. Next, please, Maggie. Another thing it can be cut with is xylazine. You might not have heard as much about xylazine. Unfortunately, on the news, it's being called horrible things like the zombie drug, the Frankenstein drug. These are not things we should be calling it, but you might have heard it described that way. It's also called trank. It's also trank dope, things like that. But xylazine is a sedative. So it gives you that, slows you down, right? It gives you those kind of effects in the drug, but it's not meant for humans. It's actually an animal sedative. You'd never get xylazine in a hospital. You might get it at the vet, right? So people don't know that this is in their drug supply, but it is really dangerous to be in the drug supply, because we're not 100% sure why it's so dangerous in humans, but one of the things it does is it chokes off the blood supply in your body. And so you actually start developing wounds and sores that can't heal, right? That's one of the ways that people know that xylazine is in the drug system. And why I wanted to bring this up is Narcan can't do anything for it, right? If a person took overdosing and it had xylazine in it, they might not wake back up with the Narcan. So they are more likely to need the rescue breathing, need the CPR. Sedatives can make your breathing slow, your heart stop, your breathing stop, everything like that. So those are two things that are going around. Xylazine is more and more in the drug supply. It's been in the drug supply since like the 60s in places like Puerto Rico, but it's more here now. So the last thing I want to remind you of with Narcan, next please, Maggie, is that when Narcan first came out, people were like, oh, don't keep it in your car, it might mess it up, but it actually doesn't matter. Heat can't damage the Narcan. If your car is where you want to keep it, where you can have it on you at all times, that's perfectly good. Don't worry about that. And the final thing, I was learning about xylazine and things like this, and there's this perception, right, that when a person is coming out of the overdose, that they're going to come up swinging, they're going to come at you, they're going to be violent with you. But the advocate that I was learning a lot of this from was saying, she notices that people respond with the energy you give. So making sure that you remember that that person is in a lot of pain. When they're coming when they get that Narcan, they've been put into withdrawal, which is really like physically feels awful, right? So just remembering that that person is going through something really scary and keeping as calm and compassionate as you can is an important part of giving Narcan. So those are some things I wanted to bring up with you tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Meg.
Thank you so much, Meg Jordan with the Public Health Minute.
Let's go ahead.
That's news you can use.
Right.
And it's important. And what we do here is we try to make sure that we're giving information, because information is power. Right.
Yeah, just as we get the next warrior on, pull up the flyer if you have it, just so that the group can see what's going to happen over the weekend, this Saturday. And so we will be launching Cut for Health. As you know, the underlying conditions that made our community so devastated by COVID were those cardiometabolic diseases. We know what they are. And this initiative is focused on using the power of that cell phone, Miss Dorothy, a text-based intervention to prevent the onset of type 2 diabetes. If you have another slide, we can see some of those warriors. They got their certificates. They've gone through 17 hours of training. They will be recruiting 600 to 700 clients to their team, and they will now be lifestyle coaches. So let's snap all the barbers and stylists.
Absolutely.
Baltimore,
Good.
Snap, Prince George's, Montgomery.
Absolutely.
That's part of Val taking charge of ourselves, investing in these small businesses. Barbershops are not churches. They're sacred spaces, but they're small business. They're capitalists. Let's help them build their business by differentiating what it means to come into a trusted information center.
Well, Dr. T, 2 minutes to go.
You got Atlanta out there and Philadelphia.
Let me go to Atlanta. And I got to go to. I'm gonna let Philadelphia be my last. Hey, Andre, how you doing, man?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Wow.
I'm Andre Russell. I happen to have a shopping salon in the busiest airport in America, and we do an excellent job on getting communication out to people. But this has been particularly interesting to me tonight because we have Dr. Davis and Shire talking about things that I've been adjacent to and all my life so far, all my adult life, and been part of my. I grew up in California, migrated to Chicago, went to school in Chicago. And when they start talking about, oh my God, we had a thing going on a long time ago when people were talking about let's leave America. Now, they're in where Miss Davis, I don't know if she's a relation to Angela Davis or not, but these are the times that I came up. And when we start talking about people that might be activated about, well, you know, I got pissed off about this, and I got pissed off about that. But what happens within my businesses, and I have several, and I've always had several, is I'm trying to make this quick. I'm trying to bounce off several things, but anyway,
you're doing fine.
We're gonna give you love. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir.
Love and respect.
Here I go.
We said about
what
love
I'm saying
and respect,
is
right?
within my shops, when we talk about mentoring, I've got like 15, 25 years of mentoring in within all my businesses. This is not something that we stumbled across. This is something that was intent within all my professional career. And what I see now is an opportunity for us to do, and it's not something flash mentoring, something that when we have people within our shop and we have an opportunity to have some things positively to say, we say them to these people, and then we offer them an opportunity to say, if you didn't get it, come back tomorrow. If you didn't get it, come back next week. If there's something that's going on in your life, come back and see us. There is always an opportunity that is open for you to come back where if you have no one else to talk to, come back and talk to us. That is a thing that has worked for us over the years. And I'm very happy about that. And I can't see any other way for these type of things to happen within our businesses. We have to be sincere about what we're doing. And I within this family of our wellness warriors, everyone, and I do mean everyone that I've been in contact with, are very sincere about what they're doing. There's nothing held back from anybody that are talking to their customers. And we are now developing into having classes where there's a possibility that we can recognize things that are happening within their lives, that we can also say, have you talked to a therapist? Have you talked to someone else? And even within what I'm doing with Emory.
Okay, so now you're going to push me to another level. you just won't let me do it.
But Andre,
he had to do it.
I love Andre saying that this conversation has tracked his adult life. And here we are, and he's giving his wisdom about what happens in his shop.
Agree, man. We love you, man.
I don't have MBAs. I don't have PhDs. I've only went to Northern Illinois University, and I had to do everything to stay there the 2 years that I was there. And so it's not, don't get me wrong, education is a wonderful thing. I have 4 sons, and they all at least have master's degrees.
There you go.
Right.
So education is not a problem.
It's just about time. That's all. We 3 minutes over. That's okay, but it's okay.
Well, you should not wait so long to pull me in, sir.
You're right. It's my fault. I promise you, it's my fault. I take full responsibility for it.
I'm just saying.
It's my fault. I love you.
We need a workshop.
I love all you guys.
Love you,
you guys have everything positive to say today, but you hit all the nerves on me, and I said, wait a minute.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you.
All right, thank you, man. Take care. Sandra Jenkins, let's go up to Philadelphia area, Pennsylvania,
and bring Katrina up too, because she'll be on this weekend.
Up
bring
too
them
as
both
well.
up.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'll just keep up the momentum with Andre. Okay, this wellness warrior in Pennsylvania. My salon is located in Cheltenham, Montgomery County. And Naturalist Studio, actually, I'm thinking, listen to all of this conversation here today about you know, if you don't know your history, it will be a mystery, as stated. The history of naturalists in Montgomery County, it's a staple in our community in Philadelphia and also in the Delaware area, where we really take hair care, and it's very important to us. We take it that extra mile. But getting to the subject matter, you know, it's like reading the Philadelphia Tribune. I'm listening to this and all these different like components about this issue. But one thing I think, Mayor Neal, and I know that we're running short of time, if we can kind of touch on oppressing the oppressor, because that's sometimes we are afraid to talk about those courageous conversations in the Black community in relation to internalized racism. So, you know, that is really where I'm headed. And we can kind of like make this into another long drawn out story and go into maybe the 10 o'clock hour in Mayor Neal.
But, you know, what we can do is we can have different, you know, segments. I mean, we can continue segments. And this is obviously, this has really touched a lot of people in a great way, right? So many people it's a lot of interest here. So we're going to do this again. So I'm going to invite you all back. Let me do that right now, right? And let's continue this conversation because it's so important. And an hour and a half is just not enough time.
Now let's
I concur. Let them come back.
Bring Katrina
back.
up. Katrina will have folk in her shop this weekend as we do the festival, as we get ready to close out here. But Mayor, I think we have a workshop. I think we have a community of practice here, and folk committed to delivering the information to people. Hey, Katrina.
Hello, everyone. How are you all? I'm at work, but the conversations are always amazing. I wanted to ask Ms. Bailey, does she do the mental health first aid training, number one?
Yeah, we're going to bring you on to do the training for our warriors, Ms. Bailey.
Okay, great. So yes, this conversation was definitely, it was definitely key. And as a matter of fact, everything that they touched on, I had these conversations today with my clients when it comes to the mental health piece, the children acting out, and you're not getting children the help that they need because you think they're just acting out. Even the kids being touched inappropriately. We had all of these conversations today in the salon. So I really enjoyed the conversation. I definitely want to get that book too, The Secret. I definitely need to get that book to have in the salon for these clients to read, because all of these conversations today was mentioned in the salon. So great conversation. I was busy, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
Great. Right. We have flat screen TVs in the shop where these can be restreamed. Now, listen, Juneteenth is coming. Come on, Val. I know it should be all year round, but let's make sure we do something on Juneteenth.
Right.
Well, what I put in the chat, what I would like everybody to do. I would like you to realize that your health is in the ballot box.
Health is wealth.
Health is wealth.
It's the only place where we are all equal if we can get there.
There we go.
The only place on the planet.
Right. So, and I agree with that. In fact, let me just say this as we part. This makes the 10th year anniversary of the Shelby versus Holder decision that gutted the Voters' Rights Act of 1965. And so we're going back to Shelby County next week, back to the scene of the crime with a summit called the Shelby Democracy Restoration Summit. It's going to be designed to create strategies.
There you go.
To resuscitate and to rejuvenate democracy and ourselves. And that's what's about. We got a tremendous thing. Peabo Bryson gonna be singing, right? We got this guy by
Drop the link. Drop the link.
I need to drop the link. It's ALNAACP ShelbySummit.org.
All right. Take us out, brother.
Let me say this. Thank you all so much. Dr. Shire, Val Davis, Ms. Bailey, thank you all so much for joining with us on this segment of You Got the Power. Think about internalized.
The cutting edge, my brother, the cutting edge. You got the cutting edge and the power.
Oh yeah, it is. You got the power. This is one of the things I do too. I forgot. But the cutting edge. And let me say this. Internalized racism is part of it, but saving our self is what it's all about. And with that said, I'd like to leave you with these two words. Remember that I love you with a perfect love. But more importantly, remember this. You got the power. Until the next time on the cutting edge. We'll see you then.
Bye
Have a
bye.
wonderful